Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized they're completely unreachable, like a ghost sitting across the table from you? That's what it's been like with my daughter lately. And I can't stop asking myself, what did I miss? I'm Nate Holloway, 43, retired Marine turned private security contractor, and right now, I'm watching the rain claw at the kitchen window like it's trying to get in. Or maybe it's trying to pull something out of me. Either way, the storm outside isn't half as quiet as what's sitting behind me. My daughter, Lila, is at the breakfast table. 15 years old. Spoon in hand. Cereal untouched. She hasn't said a word since she came to live with me 3 months ago. Not one syllable, not to me, not to my wife, Dana, nothing. Silence every single day. And it's not teenage rebellion or some moody phase. It's deeper, it's darker. Like something's taken hold of her and won't let go. I turn from the window and glance at her pale face, her eyes. They used to sparkle, even when she was tired or annoyed. Now, they're empty. Not dead, but haunted. It's the same look I saw in the guys who came home from Fallujah, broken and breathing. Lila, I say, trying to keep my voice steady, you know you can tell me anything, right? My voice has that old military grit I can't seem to shake even when I'm not trying to sound like a commander. She jumps a little, like my words startled her. Her spoon slips and clinks against the bowl. She doesn't look at me, she stares at the staircase, like she's afraid someone might hear. And that's the moment it hits me. This silence, it's not hers. It's someone else's forced on her. She's carrying a secret too heavy for her small frame. And she's terrified that if she lets even one word escape, the whole house might collapse. Now let me ask you this, what would you do if the child you love won't speak, but her silence screams louder than any words ever could? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from anyone who's been through something similar. Do you push? Do you wait? Do you break the silence? Or wait for it to break you? Have you ever looked at someone you loved and felt like they were screaming on the inside, but no one else could hear it but you? That's how it was with my daughter, Lily. Every time my wife walked into the room, something in Lily would retreat. Her shoulders curled inward. Her hands shook just a little when reaching for a glass. And when she spoke, if she ever did, her voice had the weight of someone twice her age. I wasn't always home. That's the truth I can't run from. My work demanded it. I built my own private security firm, Ridgepoint Tactical, from the ground up. Before that, I spent years in military operations, protecting diplomats, extracting civilians from war zones, exposing internal sabotage. You name it, I handled it. I'd seen liars blink mid-sentence, murderers check their watches before pulling the trigger, and conmen bury tales beneath a smile. I never missed a pattern. Except maybe the one inside my own home. That morning, Lily sat at the kitchen counter, spinning her spoon in a bowl of soggy cereal. She hadn't said a word to me in 3 days. Not one. But I didn't take it personally. I didn't think it was teenage attitude. I knew fear when I saw it. The blow-dryer buzzed faintly upstairs, followed by the soft thump of drawers opening and closing. And when the bathroom door clicked shut, Lily's shoulders stiffened like a soldier bracing for impact. That told me more than any conversation ever could. Then came the sound of high heels on hardwood, steady, sharp, deliberate. My wife, Courtney, descended the stairs in a cream blouse and black trousers, every detail of her appearance curated to perfection. At 37, she looked like the portrait of elegance. But I'd started to notice the subtle phrase in the painting. She checked her phone before even glancing at us. "Morning, babe," she said, leaning down to press a kiss on my cheek. Her lips were cold. Not metaphorically, actually cold. I didn't flinch, I just studied her eyes. "I'll be late tonight," she added. "Book club." That made me pause. "Which book?" I asked, casually. Too casually, she gave a breathy laugh. "Oh, just something cheesy and romantic. You wouldn't like it." She grabbed her purse, still not meeting my gaze. "Lily, sweetie," she said on her way out, "try not to ignore your dad today, okay?" This little act of yours is exhausting." That was the moment Lily's spoon stopped moving. Her breath hitched, and I saw it clear as Darthaway fear replaced her face like a mask. She'd worn 1,000 times. Courtney left. Silence filled the kitchen. I sat across from Lily. "She's gone for the day," I said gently. "It's just us." She didn't look up right away. But when she finally did, I saw something stir in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in weeks. "Hope. And let me ask you this. Have you ever felt your heart break and heal at the exact same moment? Because I did, right then. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes, someone you love more than life itself, and realized they're hiding something so painful, so deep, that words have abandoned them completely?" That's exactly what happened. The night I sat across from my daughter, Hazel, her lips didn't move, her eyes just stayed fixed on the floor. I'd asked gently, then firmly, then almost desperately, but all I got in return was a tiny shake of her head. "I've survived sniper fire outside Kabul. I've stared death in the face with nothing but grit and steel in my veins. I built a logistics empire from a dusty old trailer and a worn-out laptop. But nothing broke me the way Hazel's silence did that night. It wasn't just silence, it was a wall, and I knew it had been built by fear. I've always been the guy who protects. Whether it was my platoon, my employees, or don't let harm come close. I read people fast. That's how I've won in both war and business. But now, the danger was right here in my own house and I couldn't see it. Later that evening, I sat in my home office in Tacoma, eyes fixed on a dozen security feeds from our clients' warehouses. But my mind wasn't on the footage. It was stuck on Hazel's haunted eyes. And on Camille's lies. Camille, my wife for 16 years, the woman I thought I knew like the back of my hand. Lately, her stories had too many holes. Her nights out were becoming more frequent. And my gut, that same gut that once told me a Humvee was wired with an IED, was telling me something was rotten in our home. I've never been the forgiving kind. The army taught me that mercy gets people killed. Business taught me that trust, once broken, is a currency you can never spend again. You don't give second chances to snakes. That night, as I locked up the house, I paused outside Hazel's door. I knocked once, lightly. No answer. I opened the door just a crack. She was in bed, facing the wall, body stiff, pretending to sleep. I stood there a moment, something sharp tightening in my chest, and in that moment, I made myself a promise. Whatever was hurting my little girl, whoever was making Camille lie to my face, I was going to find it. I was going to rip the truth out, no matter how deep it was buried. And when I did, there'd be no soft landings, no careful conversations, no forgiveness. The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed steadily against the windows as I walked back downstairs. And as I stared out into the night, I started building a plan. A plan with no room for second chances. 3 days later, the tension in the house had grown thick enough to cut with a knife. That afternoon, Camille announced she was going out. Again this time, she claimed it was a girls' night with her co-workers from the bank, except I'd never met any of these co-workers. She stood in the hallway, dressed like she was walking into a perfume, at heels, curls, the whole 9 yards. But her hands, shaking, barely noticeable. But I saw it, and the smell of her perfume lingered in the air long after the door slammed shut. You ever have that moment where you realize the pieces of the puzzle don't just not fit? They were never part of your puzzle to begin with. Yeah, that was me, standing in that hallway, breathing in the scent of betrayal. What would you do in my shoes? If your daughter was suddenly mute from fear, and your wife was vanishing into the night with lies on her lips? Drop a comment below. I'm not asking out of curiosity. I'm asking because I genuinely want to know. How far would you go to protect your child, to uncover the truth? To make sure that fear never touches your home again? Let me know, because, for me, that night was just the beginning. And trust me, I wasn't planning to lose. Have you ever looked into a child's eyes and realized they were carrying a secret too heavy for their age? That was the moment everything shifted for me. It wasn't some dramatic revelation. No screaming, no shattering glass. Just the quiet, aching stillness of my daughter Emma sitting on the couch, her small body curled into itself. Eyes locked on a cartoon she clearly wasn't watching. Brianna had just left. I watched her taillights vanish beyond the trees that lined our sleepy neighborhood, and I stood there, holding the silence like a fragile vase. Then I walked in, heart pounding harder than I'd admit, and took a seat on the coffee table across from Emma. "Emma," I said softly, softer than I'd spoken in a long time. My voice had spent years barking orders in chaotic places, calming the panicked and pulling truth from the terrified, but now, I used it to reach my little girl. "Your mum's gone for a few hours," I told her, keeping my tone even gentle. "I just need to understand what's going on. Whatever you're scared of, you don't have to carry it alone. I can't protect you if I don't know what's hurting you." She turned, slowly. For the first time in what felt like forever, her green eyes met mine, and it wasn't just sadness in them, it was fear, raw, coiled, and ancient. She glanced toward the front door, then back to me like she was measuring something invisible. "Something dangerous, I promise," I added, leaning forward so we were eye to eye. "No one's going to be angry. I just want to help." That did it. Her lips quivered. She began wringing her hands, over and over, fingers tangling and untangling, like she was trying to pull courage from them. When her voice finally came out, it was cracked and hoarse, like a forgotten instrument pulled from a dusty attic. "Dad," she whispered, "there's something I have to tell you." My heart thudded so hard I thought she might hear it, but I stayed still, nodded once. "Go ahead, I'm here." And then she said it. "Mum and Tyler, they've been together for a while. Since before I came here." At first, the words didn't quite land. Together, Tyler, that Tyler, the name hit me like ice water. Tyler Maddox, the trainer from Brianna's gym. The guy who never stopped smiling like he was already undressing everyone in the room. 10 years. Younger, all muscle and cologne. I'd met him once, and once was enough. Back then, I saw the way he looked at women, the entitlement, the arrogance, the way his eyes lingered just a second too long. I knew exactly who he was. I just didn't know he'd gotten this close to my home. To her, have you ever had a moment where the world just tilted, where everything you thought was true snapped in half, and what replaced it wasn't grief, it was clarity? It happened to me on a Tuesday evening. I had just finished cleaning up dinner when my daughter, Lily, came into my home office, eyes red, voice barely a whisper. She'd been distant for months, locking herself in her room, withdrawing from school activities she once loved. I'd blamed it on puberty, on the divorce, on anything but what she was about to say. Her voice trembled as she sat down. "Dad, I have to tell you something, but you need to promise you won't get mad." I gave a little chuckle, one of those nervous, hopeful ones. "Lily, you can tell me anything." She looked at the floor. It was 2 years ago. Maybe more. I caught them, Mum and Jason. At his apartment, my breath caught in my throat. Jason, my ex-wife's fiance. I felt something shift behind my ribs. Like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "I was supposed to be at Kayla's for a sleepover," she continued, "but I forgot my inhaler. I went back and I saw them. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. I just stared." "They saw me too," she said, her voice smaller. "Jason said if I told anyone, especially you, that bad things would happen. He said he knew people who could make me disappear." I felt my fingers tighten into fists. I didn't even realize I'd stood up until she reached out. Grabbing my sleeve, "That's not all," she added, and her voice cracked completely. "Mum said. She said if I ruined her happiness, she'd choose him over me. Over both of us." That was when the cold settled into my bones. Not just because of the cheating. That betrayal hurt, sure, but I could live with it. I'd already been living with it, but they had threatened my daughter. Used fear and silence as weapons. Against a child, I turned toward the window, trying to catch my breath. The cul-de-sac outside looked the same as always: mailboxes, trimmed, lawns, kids, bikes, leaning on fences, peaceful, normal. Inside me, war. Behind me, Lily whispered, "Is that why you're mad?" I turned around. Mad? No, Lily, I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you for telling me. She broke down crying, and I hugged her tighter than I ever had. She didn't understand yet what was about to happen. Not really. I walked over to the desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Detective Harris. This is Jack Weller. I need to report intimidation against a minor. I paused. Yes, I'll hold. Lily sat quietly on the couch, confused. She didn't know I wasn't really calling to report Jason's threats. Those would be nearly impossible to prove, and the law too slow, too soft. No, I wasn't calling for justice. I was calling for alibi. Because, in 30 minutes, Jason Keller would be walking out of Iron Edge Gym, all pumped up from his ego-heavy workout. He'd head to his car like he always did, keys ready, earbuds in, back turned. And I'd be waiting. Jason Keller wasn't going to die. I'm not that guy. But he was going to learn what it feels like to be powerless. What it feels like to be hurt and not believed. What it means when someone bigger decides to take everything from you. He was going to lose his mobility, his reputation, his career. A personal trainer who can't walk without a brace doesn't get many clients, you see. I didn't raise my daughter to be afraid. And I damn sure didn't spend my life protecting my family just to let some coward bully her into silence. Have you ever reached that breaking point, where silence is no longer an option, where the very air in your lungs feels like it might choke you if you don't act? That's where I was the night it all went down. And I'm not ashamed to say I didn't hesitate. See, when someone threatens your child, when a grown man dares to whisper something vile to a teenage girl thinking he'll get away with it, to find out real quick what kind of man you really are. My name's Marcus Trent. I'm not a hero. I'm not a monster either. But I've worn a uniform, been overseas, and I've seen what fear can do to people. That night, I made sure Tyler Morgan understood fear in a way he'd never forget. Tyler thought he was slick. He always had that arrogant bounce in his step, like the world owed him something. I'd seen him once or twice before, swaggering out of Ironcore Gym in downtown Charleston, earbuds in, zero awareness. Classic predator, type charming, manipulative, and convinced. No one could touch him. He had no idea I was watching. That Thursday evening, I waited by the edge of the parking structure. The air was thick, that southern summer kind of thick where you can taste the heat. Tyler strolled out, gym bag over one shoulder, scrolling his phone like the world didn't exist. That was his first mistake. When he reached his black Dodge Charger, I stepped out from behind the concrete column. Quiet, calm, my boots didn't even echo. Years of training in Afghanistan had taught me how to move like that. Fast, efficient. He didn't even look up. My first strike was clean right to the solar plexus. The wind left his body like a balloon let go. His knees buckled, and before he could react, I brought the edge of my hand down on the base of his neck. He crumpled, gasping, dropping his phone. "You threatened my daughter," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. No rage, no theatrics, just truth. He wheezed something, maybe a plea, maybe a curse. I didn't care. My boot met his ribs with enough force to echo against the garage walls. Crack. That sounds that awful. Final crack was the sound of a line being drawn. "You told a 15-year-old girl you could make her disappear," I continued, circling him. "You made her too scared to speak. You silenced her with fear." Tyler's face turned toward me, his lips wet with blood, his eyes wide and glistening with panic. "Wait, I can explain." That's when my boot snapped his jaw sideways. The pop was unmistakable. If you've ever snapped a deer bone while hunting, you know the sound, only this time, it was personal. "I don't need explanations," I told him. "I need you to understand what consequences feel like. Some people think justice belongs in courtrooms. But when the system fails, when predators walk free because they know how to hide behind smiles and legal loopholes, Sometimes, justice wears steel-toed boots. I gave him 10 more minutes. 10 minutes to make sure every threat he had ever whispered would stay buried inside him permanently. He wouldn't be charming anymore. He wouldn't be smooth. He wouldn't be a danger to any other kid again. When I walked away, I didn't look back. Now, I'm not telling this story to brag. I'm telling it because I know I'm not the only parent out there who's been pushed too far. I'm telling it because silence is what these monsters count on. They count on us doing nothing, so let me ask you, what would you do if it were your child? Drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. What's the line you wouldn't let anyone cross? And don't forget, monsters don't always hide under beds. Sometimes they wear gym shorts, drive nice cars, and think they're untouchable. Until they're not. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes, someone you've shared a home with? Maybe even a child, and realized they've been lying to your face for years? That every smile, every kiss, every I love you was just a cover for something darker. That was the night everything snapped for me. I had just finished a late training session. I wasn't supposed to be. There I'd told her I had a meeting across town, but I knew, deep down, I knew. I tracked him without rushing, 23 minutes. That's how long it took from the moment he left the gym until the alley behind it swallowed him up. He never saw me coming. When it was over, I walked back to mytruck.com, controlled. Like it was just another day in security operations. I took the long way home, let the hot water rinse the blood off my hands before she came back. At 11:47 p.m. on the dot, Madison strolled in, smelling like cheap wine and lies. Book club ran late, she said, tossing her purse on the kitchen counter like nothing was wrong. I didn't look up from my chair. How was the discussion? She paused for a beat. We talked about character arcs, how people aren't always who they appear to be. That almost made me laugh. Almost fascinating subject, I replied, flipping a page in my magazine. Sadie's already in bed. She talked more today. I saw it the way her shoulders stiffened. The color drained slightly from her face. That's good, she said. What did she say? Nothing important. Yet, in the days that followed, I did what I was trained to do. Observe, document, connect the dots. My company's network gave me everything I needed. Calls, texts, financial activity. All legally pulled. All admissible. I didn't need to lie or hack. Just press the right buttons. And what I found. They'd been plotting a life together for over a year, her and that man, Connor Reeves. Plans, dreams, sex, mockery. They joked about my high-risk job. Wondered aloud how much she'd receive from my life insurance if something happened to me in the field. Their words, not mine. Still think this is just a story about heartbreak. It gets worse. There. We're recording some on his phone. Others saved to cloud accounts he didn't think anyone would find. She called me a tyrant. Said marrying me was a mistake. Said she'd rather build a new life with him, using my money, than endure another year in my house. But what truly broke whatever was left of me was this. Connor had done this before, 3 times, maybe more. Photos, messages, patterns. He was a vulture man who hunted lonely, wealthy wives and pulled them into bed and out of their marriages. Always the same script: seduce, manipulate, destroy. Then move on to the next. Madison wasn't his first, she was just next. Now let me ask you, what would you do if the person you loved had plotted your downfall with someone like that? Would you forgive them? Would you let the law handle it? Or would you do what I did and take justice into your own hands? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Be honest. I want to hear from real people, because stories like this, they're not fiction. They're warnings. And I'm not the only one. Have you ever looked at someone you love and realized, too late, that they were never who you thought they were? That moment of betrayal, it doesn't just sting, it guts you. That's exactly where I was. But I wasn't going to sit in that betrayal. I was going to bury it along with the man who made it happen. Tyler wasn't Brianna's first, and I had no doubt he wouldn't be her last. I spent sleepless nights putting everything together. Photos, bank transfers, email threads, even receipts from a cheap motel outside Nashville, where they used to meet while I was supposedly on work trips. I didn't just gather evidence, I built a fortress of it, stored copies on encrypted drives, mailed sealed envelopes to trusted contacts, and memorized every piece. Nothing would be left to chance. At the hospital, Tyler lay broken, his jaw wired shut, arms in casts that would never straighten again. According to the police report, it was a mugging gone wrong. But there were no suspects, no cameras, no witnesses. I had taken every precaution. The streetlight was out, his phone was gone, and I wore gloves. But that was only half the story. Now, it was Brianna's turn. She thought she had time, that she could mourn in peace, maybe slip away when the heat cooled, take some settlement money, run off with her crippled lover. She had no idea I was 10 steps ahead. That every message she sent, every whispered phone call, every late-night browser search about divorce laws was already documented. I wasn't just her husband anymore. I had become something else entirely, something colder, more precise. They say revenge is a poison you drink, hoping the other person will die. That's nonsense. If anything, revenge sharpens the senses, focuses the soul. So I watched, I waited, and I recorded. She never saw it coming. I wasn't always like this, but betrayal changes a man. When I dug into Tyler's background, tools that aren't exactly available to the average guy, found out just how deep this went. His full name was Tyler Morrison Williams. His resume was fake, his credentials forged, and the affairs. They weren't isolated incidents. Before Brianna, there was Karen Delania, dentist's wife, from Atlanta. Then there was Marsha Cleary, a single mum who ended up bankrupt after investing in Tyler's fake startup. But the one that stuck with me was Patricia Nolly's, a state senator's wife who lost everything: her marriage, her children, even her name in polite society. Tyler had a type: women with access, money, and just enough loneliness to let him in. I started to realize that this wasn't just about me anymore. Tyler was a patina virus. I wasn't just cleaning up my life, I was putting an end to his cycled dot that gave me purpose. But let me ask you something. If you discovered the person sleeping beside you was capable of destroying everything you loved, would you forgive them, or would you do what I did? Comment below, tell me what you'd do in my shoes. Would you walk away quietly, or finish what they started? Because here's the thing, I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to shout. I just needed patience and a little silence, and patience. That's something I've never run out of. The hunt had begun, and I always catch what I'm after. Have you ever felt like your whole life was just a setup for someone else's con? Like every moment of trust, every embrace, every whisper of love was designed to blind you, and it worked. That's how I felt the night I found the files. The night everything broke open. Before Lindsay, there had been a woman named Michelle Carter. Her husband, a good man, from what I later read, had taken his own life after discovering not just the affair, but the money that vanished with it. Lindsay's lover, the same man who had wormed his way into my life, had a pattern. And it wasn't just about seduction. It was destruction, wrapped in charm. I didn't stumble onto the truth by accident. After years of military intelligence work, my instincts don't sleep. I knew something was off. Her phone buzzed too often. Her answers got shorter. She stopped asking about my day. My old contact from Langley, now retired, but still sharper than a tack, owed me a favor. He got me access to a classified behavioral risk database, and there he was, Marcus Ellison. Real name, real history, a string of aliases, mostly used with single wealthy women. Women with families. Women who owned things, and every time, the pattern repeated. Marcus would charm them, isolate them, turn them against their partners. He'd push them, gently at first, to access accounts, to borrow client info, or skim just a little from business reserves, then he'd vanish. And the fallout, always the same: bankruptcy, shame, legal hell, broken homes. I wish it had stopped there. What froze my blood was how he used the kids. I found 2 past reports. Children needing trauma therapy after their mothers, affairs ended, threats, gaslighting. One even said he pretended to be the boy's new father and made him bury his dog, claiming it died because the kid had told his dad about the nice man. Sick doesn't begin to cover it. Then came Emma, my daughter. I went through Lindsay's texts. There were messages from Marcus, short, pointed, strategic. Check his cloud files. What's the access code for that safe? Does he keep backups in the garage or at the firm? Lindsay had responded, not just responded, participated. They weren't planning to run away, they were planning to destroy me. They had it mapped out when I'd be in New York for a quarterly summit, what day the IT guy would be off sick, which clients had upcoming renewals. They wanted to strip my firm clean and sell my entire security strategy to a competitor across state lines. But none of it compared to what I found in the storage unit. Tucked in a weatherproof case behind a row of dusty plastic bins was an old MacBook, password protected, of course, but that's child's play when you've done what I've done. What it held was worse than anything I expected. Detailed psychological profiles, names, photos, notes like a therapist's diary, only written by a predator. And there, under Subject 6, Lindsay M. A full breakdown of her personality, flaws, her fears of abandonment, her resentment toward my schedule, even her insecurities about aging. He had exploited every single one. With precision, with pleasure, and me. I was Subject 7, D. Forward. There were scans of my old military commendations, surveillance footage from my office parking lot, notes about my temper, about the way I hold my coffee mug, about how often I check on Emma's bedroom door at night. He knew me, which means, when he threatened Emma, it wasn't just a scare tactic. It was a surgical strike on the one part of me he thought would collapse under pressure, my fatherhood. But he got that wrong, dead wrong. See, people like Marcus think that love makes you soft, that if you care too much, you'll break when the heat comes. But he underestimated what a father becomes when his child is in danger. He didn't understand that the love I have for my daughter doesn't make me weak. It makes me lethal. And I want you, the one reading this, to sit with that. For a second, how far would you go for your child? Would you burn down your entire life to save them? Would you confront a monster hiding behind a smile and drag him into the light? I did, and I'll do it again without blinking. Drop a comment below. What would you do if someone threatened your child? Not with violence, but with manipulation, with fear, with silence. Let's talk about it. Because people like Marcus count on one thing: our silence. And it's time we stop giving them that. That question has lived in my bones ever since the night I stopped being a husband and started becoming something else entirely. Not a monster, not a hero, just something else. It all began the moment I made peace with the lie. I let her believe I was broken. I let them both believe they'd won. And in doing so, I gave myself time to uncover everything. When I decided to accept the betrayal to protect Emma, I didn't realize how dangerous that choice would make me, or how far I'd be willing to go. That night, as the cold rain tapped the window of my tiny rented flat in Minneapolis, I launched Phase 2. I didn't need revenge for the sake of pride. I needed justice. I needed peace. I spent the entire evening creating a detailed dossier on Tyler Hargrove, Emma's uncle, my wife's lover, and the man who'd orchestrated my fall from grace. I compiled everything: bank transfers, fake identities, surveillance footage, screenshots of encrypted chats, and victim testimonies. It wasn't just about me anymore. There were others, women he had swindled, hurt, erased. I'd spent months quietly tracking them down, listening to their stories, earning their trust. Some of them had never told anyone before. One woman sobbed for an hour on Zoom before whispering, "I thought I was crazy." No, ma'am, you were hunted. And now I was the one doing the hunting. Within 48 hours, the dossier was in the hands of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, the IRS, and police departments in Illinois, Colorado, and Nevada, 3 states, where Tyler had preyed on women like Emma. Even if he somehow survived what I had in store for him physically, he'd be buried under federal charges: fraud, tax evasion, racketeering. But I wasn't done. Tyler's sickness didn't end with him. It spread. His little army of co-conspirators, the gym buddies who scoped out targets, the shady advisors who helped him launder cash, the off-books private eyes who tracked vulnerable women, they were all complicit. They'd enabled a predator, so I made sure their names, their photos, their communications were all included. You ever hear someone say, betrayal is a virus? That stuck with me. It spreads, through greed, through silence, through fear. The only way to stop it is to torch every infected bridge. As I built my case, one face kept burning in my mind. My wife, my betrayer. She still wore her wedding ring like nothing had changed. She thought she was a victim, that her poor lover had been attacked by a jealous ex, that she was just a woman caught between guilt and love. But I knew better. I'd seen the messages she thought she deleted. I'd heard the recording of her voice telling Tyler, he won't fight back, he never does. That hurt more than the bruises. More than the silence. She wasn't fooled by Tyler, she was in it from the beginning. She helped plan my ruin, like it was some twisted game, so I planned hers. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten, I just waited. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed, with a text from her. Working late. Don't wait up. Right. She wasn't working. She was curled up in Tyler's condo in St. Paul, sipping wine and playing victim. She didn't know I'd installed a second phone under the Tesla's dashboard, or that I'd cloned her app logins weeks ago. I stared at the message for a moment, then smiled. Not warmly, coldly, like a man already mourning the ghost of a life he used to live. Because here's the truth: betrayal doesn't just destroy trust, it rewrites the rules. It turns love into a weapon. And sometimes, the only way to protect what's left is to become the storm they never saw coming. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and just known they were hiding something that could hurt you? That moment when the puzzle pieces click into place and what once felt like confusion turns to cold, terrifying clarity. That's where I found myself. And I knew, right then, that I had no choice but to act. The hospital was quiet. Too quiet, like the calm before a storm. But I could feel the tension pulsing through the walls. She probably thought she was in the clear, thought her careful moves had left no trail. But what she didn't know, what people like her never understand, is that I don't let things slide. Not when it comes to the people I love. Samantha Price had made her decision. She aligned herself with a man like Tyler Mason, someone who threatened my family, who silenced my daughter. That choice came with consequences, and I was ready to make sure she faced them. Just as I finished reviewing the last file, Julia stepped into the doorway of my home office. She looked, lighter, stronger, like she could finally breathe again. Maybe because, for the first time in months, she had told the truth. That night, she had faced her fear. She had said his name out loud. Dad, are you okay? You look intense. I looked up at her, letting the edge in my expression melt just enough. I'm fine, sweetheart, just handling a few things. She hesitated. Is it about Mum and Tyler? Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't a little girl anymore, and yet, I could still hear the shadows in her tone, the scars that man left behind. She deserved honesty. She deserved protection. But not all the details. Some truths don't need to be shared to be honored. Yes, I said. And Julia, I need you to hear me clearly. They will never hurt you again. I give you my word. She nodded slowly, not questioning, not afraid, just, understanding. That quiet strength in her eyes, it reminded me so much of her mother before all of this, and I could see it. The fire was coming back. Some promises are soft, sweet things. Others are steel. Mine was the latter. And now I want to ask. Someone threatened your child. Would you stop at anything to keep them safe? Would you cross a line if it meant peace for the ones you love? Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you care about? Let's talk about it. What would you do if the person sharing your bed turned out to be your enemy? Not figuratively, but actively, strategically, dangerously working against you. That's the question that haunted me for weeks. Not because I was paranoid, not because I was overthinking, but because the pieces were finally starting to fit. And when the truth clicks into place, it doesn't come quietly, it shatters everything. After months of careful planning, everything was aligning. The final phase was underway. I had returned to my strategy board with a sharper focus, knowing this time there was no turning back. Grant Whitmore's empire, built on deception and manipulation, was on the brink, and he wasn't going down alone. His partner in life and crime, Savannah, was going to crash with him. Tuesday morning came like a lightning bolt. The anonymous tips I'd sent to the feds didn't just work, they exploded. At sunrise, Grant's private hospital suite was stormed by a federal task force. His laptops, phones, and hard drives were confiscated. By noon, arrest warrants were issued: mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. The whole deck of cards had collapsed. I was in my home office when it broke on the news. My daughter, Mia, sat beside me, her legs curled up, quietly eating a bowl of fruity pebbles. She'd just started going back to school the week before. The silence that had blanketed her since the chaos began was finally lifting. I could see the light coming back into her slowly, but surely. "Dad, it's everywhere," she murmured. Scrolling through her phone, "Everyone at school's talking about it. They're saying he's like some kind of criminal." I gave a short laugh, bitter at the truth. "People like Grant always are," I said. "They just hide it better than most." Later that evening, Savannah came home late, flustered, dressed for calm but clearly unraveling beneath the surface. Her makeup was flawless, but her hands trembled as she set her purse down. She tried to ease into the conversation, like she always did when hiding. "Something you'll never believe what happened," she said, sitting across from me at dinner. "Remember that guy I used to see at the gym? Turns out, he was into some shady financial stuff. Some kind of fraud thing. Crazy, right?" I studied her with quiet interest. She was good. Damn good. Her voice hit just the right pitch of concerned disbelief. If I didn't already know the truth, I might have bought her act. "Wow," I said. "That's awful. You used to train with him, didn't you?" She nodded slowly. "Just a couple times. He seemed so normal." Her voice quivered. "Just enough. You really never know people, do you?" "No," I said, barely above a whisper, "you don't." And that was it. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just hurt, I was done. That night, I moved into the next stage. Using the surveillance tools from my own private security firm, I tapped into every stream Savannah touched. Her calls, texts, DMs, emails. I set up scrapers and backups. Every word, every file, every emoji. It was all mine now, and what I found, let's just say it confirmed every instinct I'd fought to ignore. She wasn't just scared, she was calculating. Plotting her next move, reaching out to lawyers, and worse, deleting records she thought I'd never see. She was more than complicit, she was part of the operation. The silence, the excuses, the fake concern, it was theater, and I had a front row seat. So now I turn to you. If someone you loved betrayed you like that, would you confront them? Would you forgive? Or would you let them walk into their own trap? Tell me below, what would you do if the person sleeping beside you turned out to be your enemy? Have you ever had a moment where everything just ... clicked? Where every nagging doubt, every late-night whisper in your gut finally made sense? A puzzle you didn't know you were solving. That was me. Standing in the dark with my phone in hand, heart racing, breath shallow. And the worst part, I already knew what I was about to read. I just didn't want to admit it. Her name's Claire. My wife, well, at least, she was supposed to be. A decade together, a daughter we both adored, a business we built from scratch. But the messages didn't lie. She was talking to Scott's defense attorney. Not just talking, negotiating, strategizing, lining up her testimony, and quietly reaching out to her own lawyer about divorce options, and about what she'd be entitled to if I went down. She wasn't just preparing to leave me. She was laying the foundation to bury me. But that wasn't the worst of it. She'd been messaging people I didn't even recognize. Shady names, burners, advisors, she called them. People coaching her on how to vanish. Offshore accounts, fake IDs, disappear before Mason figures it out, one of them wrote. You're in too deep now. In that moment, it was like a film reel of our life played in reverse. Every kiss, every I love you, every night she held my hand when I was too anxious to sleep. None of it real, just a performance, a long con. And I was the mark. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I made copies. Every chat, every call log, every transfer. I saved it all because I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed. No, if she wanted to destroy me, she'd have to crawl over the truth to do it. But before I made my move, I had to protect the one person who still mattered. Hey, Pina, I said at breakfast the next morning. How would you feel about visiting Grandma for a little while? My daughter, Lily, looked up at me with those big hazel eyes, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Is Mum coming? Not this time, I said gently. Your mum and I, we have some things to work through. Grown-up stuff. I think you'd be happier with Grandma until it settles down. She didn't argue, just gave me that quiet, old soul kind of nod, like she knew more than she should. A few weeks, maybe a month, I said, trying to sound like I believed it. Later that afternoon, I packed her things, loaded the car, and drove 3 hours south to Raleigh, where my mother lived. Denise Callahan isn't what you'd call warm, but she's steady. She raised me alone after my dad didn't come back from his last deployment, and when I showed up unannounced with Lily and told her I needed a Verno, questions asked, she didn't blink. She just opened the door. Sometimes, the most powerful kind of love is quiet. The kind that waits at a front porch without asking why, just how long. Now, here's where I turn to you. Have you ever realized too late that someone you trusted was playing a role? That the person lying beside you at night had a script, and you weren't even in the credits? Tell me in the comments. What would you do if you found out the love of your life was planning your downfall? Because the next time I saw Claire, I wouldn't be the broken man she thought she'd leave behind. I'd be the one holding the truth. And I wouldn't flinch. Have you ever looked someone in the eye, someone you once loved and realized they were playing a long game you never saw coming? That was me, standing in the hallway of our Denver home, watching Kayla unpack her things into the guest bedroom. She was only 10, way too young to understand the storm that was about to rip through her world. My Aunt Sharon stood beside me, arms crossed, but voice soft. That little girl's already been through hell, Luke, she said. You make damn sure she doesn't go through any more. I nodded. I will, but the truth is, I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. When I got back home later that evening, something felt off. The house was quiet to quiet and my gut told me something was wrong. I walked past the living room, down the hall, and there she was. Emily, my wife. She didn't hear me coming. She was in my office, crouched in front of the filing cabinet, yanking folders out like the place was on fire. She froze the second she saw me in the doorway. Her face flushed like she'd been caught stealing. Looking for something? I asked, keeping my voice calm. I just needed the insurance documents. Kayla's school forms, she stammered. They're in the kitchen drawer, I said. Same place they've always been. She forced a smile, tight, mechanical, and pushed past me. But I saw it. The sheen of sweat on her forehead. Her fingers trembling. Her eyes flicking everywhere but at mine. She knew the walls were closing in. That night, I sat alone in the den with the headphones on, listening to the live feed from the bugs I'd planted weeks ago. I heard her make the first call to a burner number I'd traced months ago. Then another. And another. Each one more desperate than the last. She was trying to move money I'd already frozen. Calling people I'd already flipped. Trying to pull off a last-minute escape I'd already shut down from the inside. The panic in her voice grew with each call. She was scrambling, she was cornered, and, for the first time since this whole thing started, she knew it. I leaned back in my chair, the faintest trace of a smile forming. Not because I enjoyed watching her squirm, but because after everything she'd done, after the lies, the betrayal, the months of pretending new justice was almost here. Tomorrow, I'd close the final trap. At 5 a.m., I was up like always. 20 years in the army had wired my brain for discipline I couldn't shut off, even if I wanted to. Emily was still asleep, breathing light and uneven. The kind of sleep people fall into when their brain is bracing for something bad. I slipped out of bed, got dressed in the dark, and headed to the kitchen. Poured myself a coffee. Went over the last details of my plan. By 6:30, the doorbell rang. Through the security feed, I saw them Detective Sam Ruiz and Special Agent Paula Kendrick from the FBI. Right on time, I opened the door. Feigning surprise, Detective Ruiz. What brings you here so early? We need to speak with your wife, Mr. Callahan, Ruiz said, his tone professional. We have reason to believe she may have been involved with Miles Jensen's embezzlement network. She's listed in multiple communications and offshore accounts. My face shifted into a look of confused worry. I'd practiced it in the mirror. Just enough concern, just enough disbelief. It felt ironic, mimicking the same kind of deception Emily had used on me for over a year. The FBI had enough evidence to put her away for decades, but before we got there, I needed to protect Kayla. Over breakfast, I broke the news gently. Hey, sweetheart, I said, buttering a slice of toast. How would you feel about spending a little time with Grandma? Sharon Kayla looked up, eyes searching mine. Is something wrong? No, I said quickly. But your mum and I, we need to work through some things. Grown-up stuff? I just think it'd be better if you stayed somewhere peaceful for a bit. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. How long? A few weeks. Just until everything settles down. She didn't ask more. I think she already sensed that her world wasn't as safe as it used to be. That afternoon, I drove her 3 hours north to Sharon's place in Fort Collins. My aunt was tough as nails, a retired paramedic who raised me after my dad died in a fire when I was 6. She didn't ask questions when I showed up. Just opened the door, took Kayla's hand, and said, "Come on in, baby girl." I hugged Kayla tighter than I ever had before. You okay, Dad? She whispered. I will be, I said. You just stay strong, all right? She nodded again. No tears. Just strength, the kind of strength you don't expect from a kid, but you see it when life tests them too young. I'm telling this story because I want you to ask yourself something. How far would you go to protect the people you love? Would you wait silently in the shadows while someone tried to burn your whole world down and then strike when they least expect it? Because sometimes, that's what love looks like. A quiet war, a cold plan, and a heart that refuses to break. If you've ever had to make a choice like that, or if you've been betrayed by someone you thought you could trust, tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their strength too. What would you have done in my place? Let's talk about it. What would you do if the person you trusted most was secretly planning your destruction? That question haunted me for months, not in theory, not as some dramatic TV plotline, but in my own home, in my own marriage, and the moment it all began unraveling is still seared into my memory. It started on a foggy Thursday morning in Virginia. The kind of morning where the silence feels too heavy, like it knows something you don't. I was standing by the kitchen sink when I heard the knock, sharp, deliberate. I opened the door to find 2 federal agents on my porch. Special Agent Patricia Lowe and Detective Marcus Rivas. They introduced themselves, flashed their badges, and asked if they could come in. I stepped aside, keeping my expression neutral. Even as my heart pounded like a war drum. Double quotes, Mrs. Caldwell. Agent Lowe said as they stepped into the living room. We need to ask you a few questions about Anthony Russo and your connection to his criminal operations. Right on cue, Caroline appeared at the top of the staircase. She was wrapped in a silk robe, her face carefully arranged in a mask of confusion. What's going on, Ryan? She asked, her voice tremulous but practiced. The agent held up a manila folder. Caroline Caldwell, she said. We have reason to believe you were involved in financial misconduct alongside Mr. Russo. Caroline blinked, her face draining of color. Anthony Q was just a personal trainer at my studio. I barely knew him. The agent opened the folder and laid out a set of surveillance photos on the coffee table. Restaurants, hotel lobbies, Anthony's condo, timestamps spanning nearly 2 years, Caroline and Anthony smiling, laughing, touching. It hit her then that the curtain was lifting. Her perfect little act, the one she wore so flawlessly for our neighbors, our daughter, even me, it was unraveling. Her voice cracked. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right," Detective Rivas replied. "But we have evidence tying you not just to fraud, but to conspiracy, including conspiracy to commit murder." She didn't need to ask who the target was. She turned to me, eyes wide with something between fear and realization. I didn't flinch, just stared. Because the truth was, I'd known and I'd been preparing. "Let me pause here and ask you this. If you found out your spouse wanted you gone, not just emotionally, but literally, what would you do? Would you run? Would you confront them? Or would you do what I did, build the trap, piece by piece, and wait for the moment it would snap shut?" That night, I listened to her, through the audio equipment hidden in her study. I heard her scrambling, calling banks, old contacts, trying to move money I'd already frozen, reaching out to people I'd already had investigated. She didn't know it yet, but she was surrounded. Everything she thought was in her control had already been taken from her, and she was terrified. Sat in my den, sipping whiskey in the dark, and I smiled, not out of joy, not out of triumph, but out of justice, out of clarity. She had chosen betrayal. And now, the consequences were arriving. The next morning, I made Emma pancakes, her favorite blueberry with a little cinnamon. She was only 10, but sharper than most adults I knew. She looked at me across the table and asked, "Dad, is Mom in trouble?" I kept my voice steady. "Your mum and I just need to have some grown-up conversations, but I think it'd be best if you stayed with Grandma for a bit." She stared at me, quietly studying my face, then nodded. "Okay." That afternoon, I drove her to my mother's place in the Blue Ridge foothills. My mom, Eleanor Caldwell, didn't ask a single question, just hugged Emma, gave me a look that said, "Whatever this is, I've got her," and shut the door behind them. I returned home to an empty house, quiet, still, except for Caroline's voice echoing from the past. "You don't trust anyone, Ryan, not even me." And she was right, because I shouldn't have. Comment below, what do you think is worse, betrayal by a stranger, or by someone you love? I want to hear your thoughts. Now some people will ask if I regret it, if I ever wanted to call it off, and I won't lie. There were nights when I looked at her and thought about the years we had, the laughter, the life we built. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized it had all been a stage, and I was the mark by the time the final phase began, the indictment. The media, the trial. Caroline was no longer the woman I once knew. She was someone else entirely. And as the courtroom read the charges, her eyes searched for me. Maybe for sympathy. Maybe just for acknowledgement. But I gave her nothing. Because this story, it wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. Let me leave you with this. Trust is a beautiful thing. But once broken, it doesn't bleed, it poisons. And some poisons have no antidote. ChatGPT, Genoi. Have you ever looked someone in the eye, the person you shared a home, a bed, a future with, and realized you had no idea who they really were? That was me, standing in the middle of our sunlit kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina, watching the woman I had once promised to grow old with unravel in front of a federal agent. My wife, Danielle. Agent Ross laid out the stack of papers like he was dealing cards. Controlled. Another folder, another blow. Forged text messages. Fake email threads. Each one painting Danielle as the architect of a plot to have me killed. During one of my security gigs overseas, it was messy, indirect, but paired with the real financial crimes I'd uncovered. It didn't need to be airtight. Just enough to burn everything down. "David," she murmured, her voice cracking, eyes wide with disbelief. "You know, I didn't let her finish. I don't know what I know anymore," I said. And every word felt like I was bleeding truth. 2 years, Danielle, years of lying straight to my face. The air in the room got colder. Agent Ross kept going, asking her questions with this steady rhythm like he'd rehearsed it. I stayed quiet mostly. Just the broken man, the husband who wanted answers. When Ross asked for bank statements, I handed them over and tabbed transfers she never told me about. Thousands of dollars. Credit card charges from hotels I'd never stayed in. Jewelry I'd never seen. And then the kicker. Cell phone logs. Call after call between Danielle and a guy named Travis Marston, her so-called business mentor. More like her plan B. By 9 a.m., they had her in cuffs, her wrists bound, her head down, escorted into a waiting SUV while the morning sun caught the camera flashes from every angle. The local stations were already live. Someone, probably me, had tipped them off. I stood at the doorway, silent, unmoved. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel rage. I felt balance. Danielle had crossed lines. She didn't just cheat. She'd nearly wrecked the business I spent 20 years building. She'd tried to turn my daughter against me, and if I hadn't discovered the offshore accounts, the fake invoices, and the hit-for-hire messages she buried in encrypted threads, I'd be in a body bag right now. But she underestimated the man she married. When the agents left, I went to work. Phone calls, dozens of them, to my cousin in Atlanta, my old friend Drew in Michigan, my board members, my pastor.com voice, just the right hint of disbelief. I had no idea, I said. She was so good at hiding it. I feel like such a fool. Sympathy poured in. Texts, voicemails, even flower deliveries. By noon, the story was solid. I was the victim. Danielle was the mastermind. Travis, the snake she slithered toward. People love a good scandal, but they love a redemption arc even more now. I know what you're probably thinking. Is this justice or revenge? That's the thing. Sometimes they're the same. And maybe you've been there, betrayed, blindsided, watching someone you loved destroy your peace from the inside. If you were in my shoes, would you have done it differently? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to pretend to be heartbroken just long enough to expose the truth? Because I did, and I don't regret a thing. What would you do if the people smiling at your dinner table were plotting your downfall the entire time? That question keeps me up some nights. Not because I didn't survive it, but because I did, and because surviving it meant becoming someone I never thought I'd need to be. When the news first broke, I kept my tone calm and my words rehearsed. I did the interviews. I told the press how devastated I was for my daughter, Charlotte, who was staying with my sister in Vermont until this nightmare ends. That line made it into every headline. Maybe you saw it. Maybe you believed it. Everyone else seemed to. My phone rang non-stop that week. Friends called with prayers. Clients sent their condolences. Detectives praised my cooperation. I thanked each of them with the right mix of sorrow and resolve. Polite, measured publicly. Grieving, privately boiling. That's the thing about being betrayed by people you trusted. You learn how to lie with a smile. But when the cameras turned off and the house went quiet, I poured a glass of Macallan, sat on the edge of my leather couch, and stared at the photo of the three of us, her, him, me. Everything had collapsed. Just not mine. Mark Trenton, the man who once strutted around as if he owned the world, was now awaiting life in federal prison. His empire of laundering, fraud, and extortion crumbled like ash. His partners were scattering, some arrested, others fleeing like cockroaches when the lights come on. As for Jennifer, she was already 3 weeks into her 20-year sentence, and from what I've heard, federal prison isn't kind to people like her. Did I feel bad? No. They crossed a line the moment they used my daughter as leverage. That's war, and they never thought I'd fight back harder, so I drank to that. I raised the glass and whispered, almost done. The next morning came with the call I'd been waiting for. Mark's lawyer, suddenly polite, suddenly desperate, wanted to schedule a meeting. Mark was willing to testify against Jennifer in exchange for leniency. Of course he was. Rats never die loyal, I agreed. We met at the federal courthouse 3 days later. I wore my best Navy suit, played the grieving husband, carried a file full of evidence I didn't need to open. Mark was wheeled into the room like a wounded animal. Bandaged, bruised, both arms in casts. I'd done that to him, and I didn't regret it. His voice was garbled from the wired jaw, but the words were clear enough. "Mr. Ashford," he mumbled. "I didn't want it to go this far, I swear." I stared at him, this broken predator begging for grace. "Which part didn't you want, Mark?" I asked. "Was it when you plotted to kill me with my wife? Or when you suggested taking my daughter in case I didn't cooperate?" He looked down, couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't yell, I didn't lunge, I didn't need to. His life was already in ruins and I was the architect. It's easy to forgive mistakes, but betrayal, that doesn't get forgiven. It gets remembered. "Let me ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away? Or would you have burned it all down and watched them beg for the pieces? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts. Because justice doesn't always come wearing a badge. Sometimes, it walks in dressed in a suit composed and finished with pretending to be the victim. Have you ever watched a man realize in real time that his life is over? It's not like in the movies where the villain curses or thrashes or begs. No, real fear is quieter than you think. It creeps in. Hollow eyes. Twitching fingers. That look, when someone finally understands the weight of what they've done and who they've done it to. I saw it in Tyler Morrison's face. He sat across from me in that sterile interview room, arms folded like he still had a say in how this ended. His arrogance was leaking at the edges though, and when I laid the file on the table, fat with screenshots, wiretap transcripts, money trails, his lips twitched. A crack in the mask. "You're bluffing," he said, voice dry. "Brianna and I, yeah, we talked about leaving about what she'd get in the divorce, but murder." He tried to laugh, but it came out like a cough. Weak, forced. You widened with genuine fear. "Tyler," I told him, keeping my voice level. "That moment you sent my daughter into therapy, made her afraid to sleep. That's when you lost the right to mercy." His hands clenched under the table. The truth is, the murder conspiracy wasn't entirely real, but it didn't have to be. All it needed was just enough to plant the seed. And with Tyler's record, assault, wire fraud, that Vegas thing in '09, the man was a walking conviction. "Federal charges will bury you," I said. "You'll rot in general pop before trial even begins. And even if somehow you avoid the needle, you'll never sleep soundly again. Not in this country." He opened his mouth, closed it. Something inside him broke. That same mouth used to shout at Brianna when she was late with the rent. That same voice that threatened a little girl to shut up or else. But now it whispered. "What do you want?" he said, barely above breath. I leaned in, let him see it in my eyes. "I want you to understand something, Tyler. You don't get to harm a child, my child, and walk away with a settlement and a smug grin. You don't get to use people, break them, and blame their pain on passion or pressure or any of the excuses cowards like you cling to. You signed your own sentence." I told him. The second you made her scared to speak, he started trembling. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because here's the thing, I'm not the victim. I'm the predator that waited, circled, and struck when it counted. And unlike you, I don't make noise when I hunt at the door. I paused. Turned back. One last nail for his coffin. "My daughter," I said. "She's speaking again." You should have seen his face. The day I reclaimed my daughter's safety was the day I stopped doubting who I had to become. For months, I'd watched that man Brandon Callahan chip away at our peace, infecting our lives with threats, manipulation, and lies. But that ended today, and I didn't need a badge or a courtroom to end it. He sat there pale, silent, slumped in his wheelchair like the broken coward he'd always been. His hands trembled. He tried to open his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to deny, but I didn't. Let him. You'll never threaten another child. You'll never manipulate another woman. You'll never steal, lie, or ruin another family again, I said, my voice low but final. Your game is over. Your life, as you knew it, is over. I meant every word. Brandon's eyes flickered with panic. He knew. He saw it in my face. I wasn't bluffing. I was finished playing fair with people who played dirty, and he would spend the rest of his miserable days trapped in the wreckage he created. That evening, I drove across town to pick up my daughter, Lily, from my mum's place. She'd been staying there for a few weeks while I handled the fallout. My mother Ellen had taken her in without hesitation, giving her the space to laugh again, to feel safe again. Lily ran to the truck when she saw me. Ponytail swinging, her pink hoodie too big for her frame, but perfect somehow. She looked like herself, again confident, light, free. As we headed home, she asked, "How'd things go with Mum?" That question hit me like cold water. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. I exhaled slowly. She made some choices, Lil, bad ones. And now, she'll be gone for a long time. Silence filled the space between us. She looked out the window, processing that. I waited, letting her take her time. Then, "Are you sad?" I turned my head, just enough to see her expression open, unsure, and yet, there was a strength in her green eyes I hadn't seen in months. "No," I said gently. "I'm not sad, I'm relieved. Because you're safe, and I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell me the truth." She nodded, small and serious. "What about Brandon? He won't hurt anyone again." That was enough for her. She didn't ask how. She didn't need to. She'd inherited that unspoken instinct of mine to know when justice has been served, even if it doesn't come with headlines or handcuffs. When we pulled into our driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not since the military. A sense of completion, like a mission had finally ended. Not with parades or medals, but with peace. The threat was gone. The family was whole. Lily was smiling again. I'd made a promise long ago, one I never broke. I protect what's mine. Number. Matter what, Brandon and my ex-wife Carly had both learned the price of betrayal, and they'd pay it every day for the rest of their lives. That night, I tucked Lily into bed, kissed her forehead, and sat on the edge of her mattress for a moment longer, watching her breathe. Safe, calm, unafraid. That was all I ever wanted. And if you're a parent out there, if you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever been cornered by people who think they can take what matters most, let me ask you this: what would you do to protect your child? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story, because sometimes justice isn't found in a courtroom. Sometimes it's made at home. Have you ever opened your front door to a stranger, only to realize they somehow know your darkest battles better than you do? That's exactly what happened to me one rainy Thursday afternoon in Seattle. I had just wrapped up a consultation with a new client when the doorbell rang. I checked the monitor and saw a well-dressed woman in her early 50s, standing stiffly on my porch, holding a worn manila envelope. Her eyes darted nervously. She didn't look familiar. I opened the door slowly. "Can I help you, Mr. Callahan?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Grace Landers. I was one of Nathan Rourke's victims." The name struck like a dull bell in my chest. Rourke, the man at the center of my wife's criminal case. The man I'd spent over a year investigating. I recognized Grace from a footnote buried deep in a court transcript. She was the former mayor's wife, the one whose entire life had imploded after a very public scandal with Rourke. I stepped aside and invited her in, not out of politeness, but because something in her eyes told me she wasn't just here to talk. Grace sat on the edge of the leather couch like it might swallow her whole. Her hands clenched the envelope as if it were the last thing tethering her to reality. "I've been watching the news," she said, eyes focused on the coffee table between us. "Your wife's testimony, Rourke's arrest, everything. I came to say thank you." "For what?" I asked gently. "For stopping him," she said, and her voice broke in half. "For making sure that man will never get the chance to ruin another family." She wasn't crying, but her whole face looked like it had been holding back tears for years. And the way she said that man, not Nathan, not Rourke, told me everything I needed to know about how personal this was. Grace's story poured out like a dam had finally cracked. Rourke hadn't just had an affair with her, He'd studied her, found her weaknesses, played on her loneliness, convinced her to funnel money from her husband's campaign under the guise of building a future together. And when the media storm hit, he disappeared, leaving her to face the fire alone. Her husband had taken his life a month later. Her 2 daughters hadn't spoken to her since. She did 3 years in federal prison. "Deserved it," she muttered, once, staring into nothing. But then she looked at me, her voice suddenly clear. "That's not why I'm here." She opened the envelope. My fingers twitched when I saw how thick it was. Rourke kept records, Mr. Callahan. Pages and pages. Names, dates, hotel receipts, wire transfers, recordings, everything he documented. Every single woman he targeted. Every lie he told. Every bank account he used. My breath hitched. I reached for the stack with a mix of dread and purpose. It wasn't just a list of names. These were lives. Dozens of them. Some I'd already uncovered. Many I hadn't. He hadn't been reckless. He'd been meticulous. He operated like a machine. Cold, efficient, organized. And suddenly, I understood why Grace had shown up in person. She wasn't just delivering evidence, she was passing the torch. "Someone needs to see this through," she whispered. "I can't undo what happened to me, but maybe we can stop it from happening again." If you're still reading this, if you've ever thought that justice ends in a courtroom, I want to ask you something. What would you do if someone handed you the truth, and it shattered everything you thought you knew? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think people like Rourke are born that way, or made? And, more importantly, how far would you go to make sure they never get a second chance? Have you ever looked at someone you loved and wondered if they ever really loved you back? Or if they were just rehearsing for your destruction? That thought haunted me the moment I sat across from Monica Barnes in that quiet diner off Route 41. She wasn't just a whistleblower. She was the last honest person who ever worked with the enemy. She slid a thick envelope across the table. "These are for you," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't touch them yet. My gut already knew what was inside. Names, connections, lies that had built a life I thought was mine. Monica kept her eyes on me. "Brandon's lawyer reached out last week. He's trying to cut a deal. Apparently, he offered this as leverage." Brandon, the fitness trainer, the guy who wormed his way into my marriage and tore it apart like it was some sort of game. But this wasn't just cheating. As I pulled out the papers, my hands felt like they didn't belong to me. My pulse roared in my ears as I read name after name. Divorce attorneys, shady financial consultants, private eyes, even to retired judges. What the hell was this? Monica leaned in. "It's bigger than you think. This wasn't just an affair, it was a business. A full-on operation built to destroy marriages, bankrupt people, and vanish assets into offshore shadows." My throat went dry. I flipped another page. Then everything inside me stopped cold. She tapped the last page gently. "That one," she said. "That's why I called you." It was a plan, handwritten. Familiar curves and slants I'd memorized during late-night love notes and grocery lists. My ex-wife, Rachel, her handwriting. Laying out a step-by-step scheme with Brandon, fabricate domestic violence charges against me, manipulate a messy divorce, and then have me killed, make it look like a mugging gone wrong. You ever read something so vile, it makes your stomach turn hot and icy at the same time? "She wasn't just cheating," Monica said flatly. "She was plotting your execution." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Rage boiled under my skin like it did back in Kandahar, when we lost Mason in that ambush. But this wasn't war. This was home. And it was worse. "Why are you giving me this now?" I finally asked. Monica's eyes narrowed. "Because if the judge believes Brandon's story that Rachel manipulated him into everything, he'll walk in 10 years or less. 10 years? For conspiracy. For attempting to erase me from my own life. For traumatizing my daughter, Lily. 10 years was a joke. What do you want from me?" I said, trying to keep my fists from slamming the table. Monica didn't flinch. I want you to finish what you started. Her voice didn't rise, but there was fire behind it. Brandon's network is still running, she continued. They're targeting new couples, new victims, and the system. It failed me. It's going to fail you too. Unless you make sure it doesn't. She stood up, leaving the documents behind. I've done my part. Now it's your move. I sat there long after she left, flipping through pages that revealed just how deep the rot went. Everything I'd suspected, confirmed, everything I'd ignored, now screaming. And my daughter's face cynicism, trusting hovered in my mind. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about stopping something that should have never started in the first place. What would you do if someone you loved planned to end your life and the law let them get away with it? Would you let it go, or would you burn the whole damn thing down? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious. How far would you go for justice? Have you ever reached a point where justice no longer feels like a courtroom or a gavel, but a decision made in your chest, deep and unshakable? I used to believe in systems, law, order, rules. But when the people running that system are the ones tearing lives apart, what do? I'm not proud of what I did next. But I don't regret it either. Let me take you back to when I learned the truth, not just about her, but about the entire machine behind her. Melissa wasn't just my ex-wife, she was the doorway into something darker than I ever thought possible. Private investigators, faking photos and planting evidence of affairs. Financial planners who helped mobsters bury money in fake trusts. And judges, yes, judges taking bribes to push innocent people into losing their homes. Kids, everything. Melissa didn't just leave me and our daughter. She joined a full-blown criminal enterprise that profited off destroying families. You ever love someone so much that when they betray you, it breaks something permanent inside you? That's what happened. My younger self would have been horrified by what I became, but back then, I wasn't the man I needed to be. The courts, they barely scratched the surface of what Melissa's group had done. A few fines, some quiet suspensions, nothing close to justice. So, I made a decision. One I knew I couldn't walk back from. That night, I started writing names. No, not for revenge, at least not in the emotional sense. I wasn't out to hurt people for fun. But I was out to dismantle a network of predators, piece by piece. Not by filing motions, not by playing politics, but by striking where it mattered with precision. I used everything I'd learned from my years in the Marines and everything I'd built since starting my private security firm. I had surveillance assets. I had people who owed me favors. I had nothing left to lose. Each person who played a role in that network would face a consequence designed just for them. The lawyers who doctored files. I gave everything to the press, burned their credibility to ashes. The fake investigators, civil lawsuits bled them dry. The ones who caused suicides or targeted kids, they faced something else. I'll let you fill in the blanks. Let me ask you, what would you do if you knew there were still children out there just like your daughter about to be torn from their homes by monsters in suits? Would you wait for paperwork to catch up? Emma was safe now. That was my line in the sand. But there were others still in danger. And I was done playing defense. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about prevention. Permanent prevention. So I went to war. 2 years passed. I stood in front of Melissa's grave in a quiet cemetery just outside of Phoenix. I'd paid for the plot, even though she died alone in a federal prison cell. Suicide, they said. But I knew better. I didn't lay a hand on her, but I made sure her truth followed her like a shadow. Regret? No. Sadness. Maybe. Next to me stood Emma. She was 17 now. Bright-eyed, strong. About to head off to college. She never once asked to see her mother's grave. But when I told her the marker would be taken down, she said she wanted to be there. Not to mourn. To close a chapter. We didn't speak much as the workers pulled the headstone out of the earth, just watched, quiet. That name doesn't belong here, Emma whispered. And she was right. The name on that stone wasn't just her mother's, it was the symbol of a musker. lie that hurt too many people, and removing it, that was our closure. Sometimes I wonder if people think I went too far, so I'll ask you, what would you have done? If someone destroyed your family from the inside out, and the people meant to protect you helped make it happen, would you really just move on, or would you fight back? Let me know. I'd really like to hear what others think. Drop a comment, especially if you've ever been through something where justice failed you. I'm listening. And for those still fighting their own unseen wars, keep going, you're not alone. Do you ever wonder what justice really looks like? I mean not the kind in law books or courtrooms, but the kind that grabs you by the heart and says, no more lies. No more hiding. That's the justice I went looking for. And once I found it, I made sure everyone who had caused us pain felt it too. We were standing by the gravesite that morning. Cool wind, empty sky, and the sound of a forklift loading the old headstone into the back of a truck. My daughter, Madison, stood beside me, arms crossed, expression hard to read. She wasn't a kid anymore, but in that moment, I saw the same confused little girl who used to ask, why doesn't Mum come home like she promised? She finally broke the silence. So, this is it? Madison asked, nodding toward the replacement stone. No beloved wife, no caring mother, nothing. She gave up the right to those words. I said, without flinching. She earned something else entirely. The new granite marker was clean. Just her name, Kimberly Lawson. The day she was born, the day she died, nothing more. No lies carved into stone, no tribute to a role she abandoned when she chose to betray us. You see, when the truth came out, what she did, who she protected, and how many lives she helped ruin, I couldn't let it go. I wouldn't. Kimberly had been part of something vile, something so wrapped in power and deception that if I had blinked, I would have missed it all. But I didn't blink. Over the next 18 months, I went after every last person tied to that network. Crooked lawyers who twisted the truth, disbarred, imprisoned. Private investigators paid to dig up dirt and bury facts. Licenses revoked. Financial advisors laundering money for people like Tyler Gaines gone. I didn't stop there. The judges were the real prize. They were the ones who'd sworn to protect the innocent, and instead sold that duty for envelopes of cash and promises of political favors. I gathered every recording, every wire transfer, every bit of testimony, and I dropped it all in the laps of the feds, the press, and their rivals. It was a clean sweep. 3 judges, 3 trials, 3 convictions, all of them sentenced to federal time. And Tyler didn't make it past the first 6 months of his own sentence. Officially, they said it was a suicide in protective custody. But let's just say, I made some calls. Inmates can be very persuasive when you explain the kind of man they're dealing with. He spent his final days afraid, exposed, powerless. Just like the children he hurt. Do I regret it?